Hello, I'm going to stay very still in this video because none of the costuming arrived, so I'm going to do it in post. I had ordered like elf ears and a headband and some shitty steampunk goggles, but they didn't turn up. Next time. So this week we're going to be covering the story of the double decades old now Jak and Daxter series. A game that stood out from the crowd in a wave of fantastic platforming games on the PS2 actually. And it was a precursor, you'll get that later, to Naughty Dog's progression into like blockbuster story games like Uncharted and The Last of Us 2. So today I'm going to talk about why the series was so special, why it stood out from the crowd, why it means so much to me, and also, where is it now? Where is it? So let's get all the mandatory YouTube rubbish out of the way now. I'm a small channel, and a great way that you could help me out and help me grow would be to give me a like and a comment. If YouTube sees that you've done more than one kind of interaction, they'll be like, oh my god, this incredibly sweet, clever, intelligent, funny person was so impressed by this video. I better show it to everyone. He must be really, really great. If you can't think of anything to comment, then just leave me a star emoji, because you're a star for helping me out. Together, you and I can trick the algorithm into thinking that I'm really interesting and great. And those are just, you know, small, free, easy ways that you can really, really help me out growing as a channel and helping to convince YouTube to value me as a person. But I also have a £1 Patreon if you're interested in supporting me not for free. I have plans to grow and have better tiers and stuff like that, but for now, it's purely just for people who, out of the goodness of their hearts, want to show support for me as a channel. I think that's all the things YouTubers say covered. So let's get into it. First things first, apology. The video title is a lie. It's not 20 yet, it's 20 in December. It turns 20 in 2021. I feel like that's a small enough lie that that detail doesn't really matter. Plus, by the end of the year, the video will be right. And yes, this does mean that the PS2 is f***ing over 20 years old. We're all older in reality than we think we are in our brains, and terrifyingly, time only gets faster as you get older. So let's all buckle in and enjoy the video. Jak and Daxter originally came out in the same kind of era as platformers like Ratchet and Clank and Sly Raccoon. Oh my god, Sly Raccoon was so good, so good. Was it called? It was called Sly Cooper, wasn't it, in America? I know it as Sly Raccoon because that's what it was called here. Anyway, because Ratchet and Clank is going to be on the PS5 with Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, it has some of the more gorgeous, funny, intelligent, beautiful people asking, well, where's Jak and Daxter? So like a true internet goblin, I'm going to take inspiration from our Queen Jenny Nicholson and answer that question with an internet-friendly numbered list. Part 1 of the list will be, what is Jak and Daxter? It's going to be a quick nostalgic jaunt through the release timeline of the games to give this video a bit of context for those of you that maybe accidentally didn't ever play a Jak and Daxter game because maybe your copies were stolen or something, or maybe you just hate me personally. Part 2 will be why Jak and Daxter? What made Jak and Daxter so special? Why was it so crucial to Naughty Dog's future in games like Uncharted and The Last of Us? And I guess why I love it so much as well. Part 3, when is Jak and Daxter? When's it going to be coming back? Where has the series gone? And what are the plans for the future? So, that's what you're going to get. Let's dive in. Let's get started. Scart lead. Was that a thing back in that era? Did we use SCART leads for the consoles? It's all up here. It's all up here. It's all up here. Part 1. What is Jak and Daxter? So I want to give Jak and Daxter context in maybe 2 minutes or less, because all my videos are getting too long now to be able to get them out every week. So let's try and really rush through this. We'll see. Jak and Daxter is set in an unnamed fictional science fantasy world deliberately inspired by combining Eastern and Western culture. The world's energy takes physical form in eco, a substance that comes in different types and in terms of gameplay mechanics gives Jak different kinds of power-ups. Dark eco is an evil substance that accidentally turned Daxter from a human into the little creature that you see now. The game heavily features the constant presence of technologically or magically, you know, it's kind of vague, ruins and devices left by a race of ancient beings called the Precursors. Get it? precursor to like The Last of Us and shit. The joke from the beginning. Jak and Daxter was released in 2001 and saw Naughty Dog move from a kind of like fixed on rails platformer like Crash Bandicoot into an open world. It's Jak and Daxter's job to save the world from being flooded with dark eco by two plonkers, I forget their names, and it reportedly sold like 3.64 million copies. It was very light-hearted, it was playful, it had nice cutscenes with like kind of jokes for the adults and stuff. Jak 2 came 2 years later in 2003, and its biggest inspiration was apparently Grand Theft Auto 3. The tone completely shifted, it became a lot more dark, put a pin in that. Jak got given a voice, there was more of a story focus even, a wider cast, more missions. You're projected into the future and have to protect a city from being destroyed that is very kind of cyberpunky, you know? And whereas before, eco was this kind of like energy force steeped in mysticism, in this world, the most common presence of eco is ammunition for your like Nerf gun. So yeah, this marked a big turn in tone and direction for the game series, and for Naughty Dog in general, but we'll talk about that later. Jak 3 came along a year later in 2004, and the biggest inspiration for this game was apparently Smuggler's Run. Whereas you were on hover vehicles and stuff in Jak 2 when you were hijacking them in the city, now you're out in the desert with wheeled vehicles in a kind of like Mad Max style kind of gameplay. You still visit the city and stuff, but yeah, it was kind of a shift again. And Jak 3 was the last one that I played, I'll be upfront and say. Like, I really loved that trilogy and the story and stuff like that, but then it kind of lost my interest a bit. Maybe that's indicative of a wider fan base as well, but it lost my interest a bit because it sort of went into like spin-off territory. In 2005, we had Jak X Combat Racing, which is kind of it's been described as if Crash Team Racing is Naughty Dog's take on Mario Kart, then Jak X would have been their take on Twisted Metal. Then on the PSP we had Daxter, and I think it's kind of cute, you know, on the smaller console to release a game based around the smaller character. But it was generally a simplified version of the traditional game, like stripped back. The last one, Jak the Lost Frontier, was released on the PSP and PS2, weirdly 3 years after the release of the PS3. So I don't know what the thought process was there. Maybe the PS2 was just very compatible with the PSP. But basically the big gameplay mechanic here was dogfighting, right? Flying around, stuff like that. It was very different, but it had the third-person gameplay again. It wasn't badly received, but it was definitely low compared to the game in its heyday. What you had in general was a steady decline in sales as each further game was released. A little bit of an uptick for Daxter. I imagine maybe it's because on handheld consoles there's a more limited choice of games, let's say. But yeah, that's you all caught up. A lot of this timeline was built on Francis Kenner's article for Game Grin called Whatever Happened to Jak and Daxter, and I'd recommend giving that a read if you've got the time. As always, it'll be in my sexy reading list down below, so you can find it there in the description. Part 2, why Jak and Daxter? So why or is Jak and Daxter so special? Oh, this is a lemon energy drink, by the way. It's not tea like last time. Well, why is Jak and Daxter so special? Well, I'll tell you why. Because that's why we're here. That's why we're here. I'm going to tell you. The aesthetic. The world of Jak and Daxter has this kind of aesthetic that kind of made it really stand out at the time, that is inspired by like both Western and Eastern cultures in a way that combines nature and mysticism with developing technology in a kind of like, could you call it eco-punk? No, I want to avoid that because it's got nothing to do with eco as in like, you know, eco, Jak and Daxter eco. Nature punk, but I think the closest like real definition of the genre is science fantasy. The only examples I can really think of is like Adventure Time does this, combining like magic and technology, and also Winx Club. Probably because I've been watching so many videos on that lately from channels like Modern Girls because of that new remake that's come out. But as you could probably predict, like the elements of mysticism seem to come from like Eastern culture, and the elements of technology, industrialism seem to come from Western culture. A lot of the character designs are based on a kind of infusion of both anime and manga style artwork and also Disney. This combination of like a East meets West, industrialism meets mysticism kind of visual design style made it really, really popular globally, right? Like this game was popular all over the world. But brings us into our next point, Reinvention. As we've seen, like the first game was very much like a classic mascot platformer, but then the second was kind of like Grand Theft Auto for preteen Shadow the Hedgehog boys. Then it progressed into like racing and then into like flying and dog fighting, and it's just kind of I think it was good for them. One of the appeals of the first game was that there were so many different ways to play, right? There were so many mini games that were tied into the story. But their reinvention of the game into Jak 2, when they changed the tone, they made it a lot darker, pushing it into the city and making it all about guns made it seem a lot more Western. And that apparently came with a huge drop-off in sales in like Eastern audiences, especially in like Japan, I think. But for me, as a preteen when I picked up Jak 2, it felt so dark and edgy, right? I was like, oh my God, I can hijack this hover car. Oh my God, I have a gun. And that was part of why I liked it so much. Because I was a huge Jak and Daxter fan when I was a kid playing that game. And then when I'd become a preteen, playing Jak 2, kids with more lax parents were playing Grand Theft Auto. I wasn't allowed to play Grand Theft Auto, but this was cool and edgy. Like it got me. And that reinvention, I think, is what ended up making me more interested in the franchise as a whole, because I'd been there for 2 evolutions of it. Like I said before, that the first Jak and Daxter was like an open world, which was kind of new for Naughty Dog, but it holds the Guinness World Record for being the first ever open 3D world with no loading screens. Like there was enough innovation going on in the back end, that Naughty Dog were developing games that had no load times. Do you know what I mean? Like that, for that time in 2001, 20 years ago, that's fucking cool, right? Like I know that, thinking back on it, I know probably how they did it, because there is a lot of like passages to walk between. The way that now every AAA game has you squeeze through, tight tunnels and stuff, right? Because that's when they're doing their loading. But still, for them to trailblaze that, like, I think that's really cool. And it was Jak and Daxter that gave them the room to do it. And more specifically, it came around the same kind of time that Sony had just bought Naughty Dog. So suddenly they had loads of money and they were just developing for the PlayStation. And in terms of development, I guess that rolls us on to the next one, which is Naughty Dog's development. Like, part of what makes this game so cool is that it has so many turning points for Naughty Dog baked into it. Naughty Dog is now like one of, if not it's a blockbuster studio, right? Like they make games that win Game of the Year. Everything they release dominates the presses. They're a huge studio, right? And they've carved out this niche of having like these incredibly crafted cinematic games, right? A lot of people criticize Naughty Dog for saying that their games are movies that you play. And I don't necessarily think that's a good criticism, because that's something based on taste. I think their games are fantastic. And I think that a movie based in a game creates a much more crafted, curated experience that can create much better characters and a much more personal experience with them. But that development of movie within game came from Jak and Daxter. Well, Jak 2 was kind of the turning point that led them to that direction, that like the traceable point back to when they started to head towards that niche. In Adam Carey's article for Fandom, titled How Uncharted Changed Storytelling in Games, he writes, by the time Jak 2 was in development, Naughty Dog had embraced the use of a camera for their video games and were really in the business of making movies inside video games. Andy Gavin, co-founder of Naughty Dog, said with Jak 2, it's almost written like a movie. The story integration really got a serious push. It has an elaborate plot and all of these in-game cutscenes. They're not movie stuff, not FMV, they're just a part of the game. We tried to interweave it with the game, so you're really playing the story. In Jake Kleinman's article, Jak 2 Changed Naughty Dog Forever, Last of Us Part 2 Can Do It Again, he says Jak 2 marks the moment when Naughty Dog shifted from its childish origins and began the long march towards mature games. Is it bold to say that without Jak 2 there would be no Last of Us Part 2? Yes. Am I going to commit to saying that? Yes, yes, I am. You know, the mature themes, the basis in story, the development cycles, becoming a blockbuster studio, playing a movie, like, it's all here. It's all here in Jak and Daxter, where they're like, you know, practicing with it, I guess, basically. Maybe they're not the most well-known games now, but I think it still counts a lot that they were the game series where Naughty Dog was cutting its teeth to become the kind of game studio that it is today. I just think that's cool. Do you not think that's cool? All right, anyway, let's move on to part 3. Part 3, where's Jak and Daxter? So now we know what Jak and why Jak. Where Jak? Easy answer, gone. Gone. He's gone. Better answer, it's in their hearts. There has been attempts to make more Jak and Daxter, but Naughty Dog has had so much success with other projects that it's been more lucrative for them to focus on this new niche they were developing, which they then became known for. They're known for like ultra-realistic, genre-defying, award-winning games like The Last of Us and Uncharted. And those games in the past prevented them from returning to a new Jak and Daxter project. Now, a lot of this information I'm about to use comes from a book called The Art of Naughty Dog. I don't own it, I couldn't get a copy of it, couldn't find an online copy either. So I'm using quotes from the fandom wiki that uses the book as a reference. So take all of this with a pinch of salt, like it's all allegedly, right? Because I don't have the first-hand reference evidence with me. But there were plans for another Jak game, right? It was like codenamed Jak 4. They decided they were going to take like a contemporary, more realistic approach. And Naughty Dog even described Jak and Daxter as a treat to come back to. The book apparently describes that there were already so many firmly established relationships, character personalities, and character motivations that it became tough to feel engaged by the prospect of making a new Jak and Daxter game. If we stuck to the constraints of an already established world, would we be happy with the type of game we were about to make? If we diverged too greatly from those constraints, to tell the type of story that we wanted to tell, were we actually making Jak and Daxter anymore? So it sounds like, to me, they wanted to reinvent the whole thing, right? They've got a new art style, they've got a new contemporary approach, they're looking back at all of the old Jak and Daxter stuff and thinking like, this is quite restricting. So that really gives me the impression, this is nowhere confirmed, that they were gonna just like maybe reboot the whole thing. But apparently this new art style and contemporary approach was met with fan backlash. And to me, that sounds like that was maybe the nail in the coffin of the project they already weren't fully 100% on. I mean, we all have a thing that we love doing and know we should do, but then just don't do it, right? Apparently, I forget the name off the top of my head, but the studio ended up saying like, well, we can't do this, we can't commit to it, we've got Uncharted on the way, we're gonna just like, do that. We're gonna put everyone on that. And that's what I mean by like, these other projects that were becoming bigger, more well-known, more famous, getting the studio its niche, they just kind of became the preferred option. But in Uncharted games, you can still find like little precursor orbs from the Jak and Daxter games and stuff like that. There's still lots of nods to Jak and Daxter. They clearly still look on it fondly. I mean, they've said that it's never off the table, and they have re-released the first 4 games as the Jak and Daxter collection, and it's so cheap on the PlayStation Store at the moment. And so I'd say it's well worth trying out if you haven't. I bet that they're all emulated, and so I bet that they control terribly, haven't been improved. I remember Jak being quite hard. I don't know if that's because I was young or because you know, it was hard. But online seems to think that it's quite hard. So I'm gonna take that. In conclusion, 20 years later, Naughty Dog has an insane influence on the world of blockbuster AAA video games, and any Naughty Dog release dominates the presses. Like I said before, it just warms my heart to know that what got Naughty Dog to where it is today as a studio is just games that I was so engrossed in as a kid. There's just something so satisfying about seeing that journey, isn't there? Like, seeing something evolve, seeing the stages of it. And I'm proud to have liked and played the games when I did. It just feels like it's a cool moment in history of a now huge developer. So, I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. That's Jak and Daxter. I have a huge urge to go back and play it now, so I'm probably going to be buying that bundle off the PlayStation Store. But I hope you've enjoyed spending time with me as much as I've enjoyed spending time with you. Remember that if you give me that old double whammy of a like and a comment, we can trick YouTube into thinking that I'm a super interesting person that you love spending time with. And if you can't think of anything to comment, just leave me a little star emoji, because you're all stars. You're a star. You're a star for leaving me a little emoji. Also, if I start telling you to just heap praise on me down in the comments, that's weird. Tell me if you played the games, you know, if you don't want to leave a star emoji or you can't think of anything else to say, then love you, bye.